Hello everyone, I hope your new year is going well. Today we're going to address a slightly different topic. I'm sure it'll be useful. Please stay until the end because I have some variations that are going to happen soon, maybe next week, so just so you know about some changes. I'm going to talk about today accessibility and worship in church spaces. So I'm going to give you a structure. Let's say you're going to a church or a worship space that you'd really like to attend, but it's not really accessible. So let me give you some tips on how that can be done, and then you might be able to move forward either with someone else or a team. But I'll give you the structure here so that this can be applied not only to a worship or church space, but to any organization you belong to that you would really want to participate in. So let's get started. All right, so the first point, of course, someone has to lead. Someone has to be inspired to do this and say, we need this, right? So someone has to come forward to do that. And it could be you, could be someone else. It doesn't necessarily have to be the person in the wheelchair, and we'll address that in a moment. 2, you need a team to help coordinate and research. So let's say that you see that you need ramps, you need accessibility for wheelchairs. Great. However, if you address only the people in wheelchairs, the project might get pushed aside because you're not addressing a wider group. So it's really going to be important to say, okay, wheelchairs, and also who else might benefit from an upgrade to this worship space or to this church. And one of them is for the blind, and the other one is for those who are very hard of hearing. Not the deaf because they can't hear, but they'll need sign language or something on a screen, caption on a screen. But if you have to include a wider group, of course it can be for those who need a wheelchair accessibility, but you need to make, your proposal needs to include a bigger group so that they don't say, oh, they're just looking at wheelchairs. So we'll put this aside because we want to address, if we're going to address one person with a disability, then we want to address everybody else. So which is kind of fair if you're going to work on funding. So you've got to do your research. You've got to say, okay, so we need these things for wheelchair accessibility in this space. So that's important. But then think about those who are hearing impaired, to put in a hearing loop in the church. So you can research that. And then for the blind, the bathroom door, the entrance, anything else that the blind might need to make sure that the space is accessible. Because a lot of times, one of my gripes is altars. There is a symbolic symbolism in regards to the steps going up to the altar in many Christian worship spaces or churches, and that means Christ, going up to Golgotha. Sorry, Mount Calvary. Hello, no, to Golgotha. So those steps are symbolic to that. However, if a person in a wheelchair wants to participate and do the readings and help with readings or help with preaching, depending on which group you belong to, then it'll be important. Either can be done two ways. One, you can have or request a ramp going up onto the altar, or for if the person is going to do readings, then for them to do it at the base of the altar, which is what I do in one of the churches I participate in. I do it at the base of the altar where the cantor sings, so I'm right next to him. So when you are doing your research, you've got to look at everything from the entrance of the church to the back entrance to the altar. If you have steps up to the altar, you've got to look at doorways. You've got to look at the needs for the hearing impaired. You've got to look at needs for the blind. So you got to include everybody so that this project that you're going to present goes through, because you're including everybody, yourself and everybody else. All right, so you got to do your homework. Funding. You got to look and bring forth some funding ideas. In my case, it's a little bit easier. I didn't even present the project. This is a time where I had already lost my hearing. I had had surgery and I already had cochlear implants, but I was on this committee that addressed the needs of the elderly and the infirmed in my church. And we had a pocket of money that was given to us for any medical or any assistance for that population. So there was that money sitting there, and we hadn't done anything with it. So before we lose it, we had to do something with it. So one of the members said, hey, why don't we put in a hearing loop? And I was like, that was my line. But I let him run with it because it was like, okay, you know. So the plan was to set up a hearing loop in the church. And so I mentioned, okay, well, if you want to do that with the money, then these are the organizations that I know that do hearing loops in the state. So, you know, because there's not a whole lot of groups that do hearing loops and know how to install a hearing loop correctly, because it's a little tricky. You know, sound is alive and it moves, is very dynamic, and you have to know the space and how the building is built, what the building is built out of, and how this hearing loop is going to react to the space. So you have to do all that, and the best thing is to get a group that knows exactly what they're doing. So you have to do your homework in that sense if you're going to add, you know, wheelchair accommodation and for hearing loops. Funding source, so you have to seek out some funding sources. Are you going to do events? Are you going to do raffles? Are you going to do car wash? You know, how are you going to fund the accommodations for wheelchairs, hearing loops, for the blind? So how are you, where is that money going to come from? You might have the funds already, you just don't know how, you know, that's going to go forward. So if you have the money already, congratulations, you need to put the plan together, and it has to be really solid. Okay, so then what comes next is the request and presentation to the finance committee. So every church, every church or any worship space should have a finance committee or a finance team. I don't know what they would call it, but every church is different. And this can be for a synagogue, this can be for a Christian church, this can be just a worship space, but there should be a finance committee. So once you have your plan in place with a person who's going to lead, with a team to help coordinate and do the research, you have to spell it out. You know, what's the plan? What's the funding source? How are you going to get the funds, or if you have the funds already? And then you have to present this to the finance committee and say, hey, we really want to do this. The funds are right here, or this is how we're going to raise funds, and we want to ask permission to do this. And these are the things that we want to do to change the space and make it accessible. Seek approval. So I'm presenting, once you present the whole plan, where the funds are going to come from, what you want to change in the space to make it accessible for you and others, then you have to sit and wait for the finance committee to get back to you and say, yep, that's a good idea. We like it. It's solid. We have some recommendations. Please go forward. So obviously somebody from the finance committee has to be involved, because people have to sign checks and all that kind of stuff, and funds are coming in. It's not so hard, funds coming in, it's the funds going out to pay for the accessibility project. So you have to have somebody from the organization to sign those checks and to oversee how the funds are being dispersed throughout the project. Uh, so you have to kind of wait for the approvals, but also you got to make sure that somebody from the finance committee is part of the whole project. Implementation of the plan, which is the big part, in your committee, some people might take a piece here or a piece there. I had to go see my family. I'd had a plan during Christmas to go see my family, but the project continued. We got in contact with the group that was going to install the hearing loop in the town of Kiel, which is a tiny town here in the state of Wisconsin, but they were the best, to do this installment of the hearing loop. So while I was out, the pastor would call me and say, this is where we're at, this is what we're going to do, this is how they decided to install the hearing loop, because hearing loops can be installed in a variety of forms depending on the construction of the space. So the pastor called me and was teasing me. We were going to put it on the floor all the way around all the pews. And then he called me and said, oh, they just thought of replacing the flooring. I was like, what? My hair almost fell out, but he was just saying that to tease me. But actually now, my church really worked hard in getting out of debt, because they had some debt going on, and what they decided to do was, it used to be a church and a school, and the school is being used by another Christian faith, which is fine with us, because it's for boys who don't have access to really good supportive education, and they're very deprived. So we support that a million times over. So they took over the school, and that was fine, but we still weren't using all of our parking lot. So what the church decided to do was sell a piece of that parking lot, and there was a company who wanted to build some apartments, for the community. So it was like, oh, okay, for our neighborhood. So we were like, okay, so we chopped off the piece we wanted to sell, and with that, once we got paid, the church got paid, we were able to pay off all our debts. So we are debt free now. Congratulations to us. I mean, that really brings a big smile on my face. But also, since we're debt free now, we can, bring in some funds. And what the parish has decided, the church has decided, is to make I don't know what you would call it, kind of like an entrance way. They're going to take out, because our church is shrunk in size a little bit, we're going to take out 8 pews from the back, and we're going to create a space in the back of church to be able to host our coffee and donuts and our meetings and stuff where it's accessible. Because right now, where they usually meet is in the lunchroom, which I would have to go across the gym. But even if I get across the gym, there are stairs inside the building to get up to the lunchroom. So I would have to go all the way around the entire building to use a back door to get to the lunchroom. So, and that is an obstacle for not only me, but other members who are elderly and are also using wheelchairs. So they've thought of, accessibility. So they're gonna do this big project, and I was so surprised. I was out for a little bit, and when I came back, I saw this plan in the back of our meeting room, and I was like, Father Paul, what's that about? And he said, oh, we're gonna create a space in the back of church. We're gonna take out some pews and create a big space so we can meet, and so we can have our coffee and donuts, and we can celebrate after church, after Mass, and that everyone can have access to that space. So it was just awesome for me, because then I don't have to worry about going through the gym and then being stuck, and not worrying about going all the way around the building and going to that secret back door. So this is really good news. But of course, to do that, the church had to get out of debt and figure out a plan to raise funds. So this is really going to happen. So I'm going to be able to share coffee and donuts and conversations and participate in meetings and do all this much more often. So this is awesome because it's including me, but it's also including a lot of other people who can't walk that far. So, and that's how a plan needs to work out. Even though you're looking at wheelchair accessibility, you got to look at accessibility for other people as well and include them in the plan. So I'm hoping this helps. So I'm going to review the points here. Someone to lead, a team to help with, to coordinate and do your research, a funding source, where from, and then once you have a funding source or plan for the funding, then you put the plan together as to what you want to change or add to the space so it'd be more accessible. And then request and do the presentation to the finance committee so they can see the plan, they can give their input and tighten up the plan a little bit. Then seek the approvals from the finance committee, and then the implementation of the plan, which involves a lot of people. So these are the points. Those are 6 points that you have to cover at minimum to it, and it's not a big huge thing, but you do have to have all your duckies in a row so that this works out well in this space. And it can be another organization. It doesn't need necessarily to be a worship space or a church, but this is key steps that you need to make happen so that it all goes through, it all happens, and that you make many people happy in your worship space, your meeting space, and your church. If you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Lisa, and this is Power Wheelchairs for Success. We deal with everything to do with wheelchairs from A to Z, power wheelchairs, manual wheelchairs. This is all based on my experience, my lived experiences. Of course, I do my research on other things that I haven't done before, and I present that to you in terms of ideas or tips or guides and etc. So anything wheelchairs. That's what we do here. And for everybody else and for the people who are new, I will be moving downstairs. I'm in an assisted living, and they're going to move me downstairs, which is wise because I can't use stairs, and if there's ever an emergency, I'm going to be royally stuck. So that's going to be happening probably at the end of this week, maybe next week. So my whole environment is going to change. So just so you know that back there is going to change. We'll make it as pretty as possible. I'm hoping to get like a book stand or something to put behind me or some pictures or whatever. So we'll work at that, and all you guys can vote and tell me how it looks, and we can see what changes we need to make. So welcome again, and if there's any topic that you would like us to address, that would be great. That gives us some ideas and things to research and to create for you. So welcome, and see you in the next one.